So I think one of the things that's like most interesting to me, and I think a lot of the questions that I get from startups or people that are considering investing in this space is, how the firm actually operates. I mean, you've grown now to how many people are working at Fifth Wall? Is it
over 20 people?
20 something. So what's the operation look like? How does it work? Who does what? How do you delineate responsibilities? How do you guys operate internally?
You want to tackle that first? Or?
So, when we first started Fifth Wall, the vision was that we would advise large real estate corporates, frankly, the biggest buyers, the biggest users, the biggest customers of real estate technology, help them identify pain points, back solve to find the technologies that could solve them, and then invest in those companies, alongside structuring those commercial partnerships. In the abstract, it sounded kind of very clear, and I think what we learned was that in practice, it's actually very hard because there's a lot of moving parts there. And so what naturally has happened at Fifth Wall is that we've structured our organization around kind of the key third parties that we are interacting with. So on the one hand, obviously we're investors, and so we have a team that invests, and they pursue opportunities that we think can be very strategic to our LPs and where we can influence the outcome. Alongside that, and Casey, I think we'll talk more about this, we have an advisory team, which it is there to support our strategics, help them identify pain points, diagnose those pain points, kind of run RFP processes to try and find solutions to them. And then actually more recently, we are building out a business development and partnerships team, which really works on behalf of the portfolio companies we've invested in, both supporting partnerships that we contemplated going into the deal, and actually just making sure they get insight and access and distribution from the broader real estate industry. And so I think the power of what we've built is actually in the intersection of those kind of three spheres, because they all are incredibly important. And I think the combination of the three is really what makes us unique as kind of a organizational model for a venture capital fund.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I think Brendan did a great job, and I think the core of it all is that I think the worst thing that Fifth Wall could evolve into was a venture capital fund where it feels like, whether it be our strategic anchor LPs or the real estate, broader real estate industry in general, feels like we're just slocking our portfolio companies. We support our portfolio companies, and we encourage their adoption and use cases. But when you're invested in by a large strategic, they're looking for partnership from an advice, and that has to be unbiased. And there are going to be situations where an anchor strategic LP is looking for a solution and a VC-backed company isn't the right company to provide it. And I never want to tell a strategic no when we're evaluating those organizations, because we're only just a VC fund. And I think that's the most important takeaway here today, is that Fifth Wall is not just a VC fund. We're actually a platform. And having that flexibility and the broader sense of what that platform implies allows us to service every constituent that engages with Fifth Wall, and I think effectuates better outcomes at the end of the day.
Casey, from your perspective, what does it feel like every day, day in and day out, in terms of what you're focused on for the firm?
Yeah, no, I actually think that the platform view is a wise way to think about it. I think from my perspective, I often wake up thinking like one of our strategic LPs. And so, to their remarks, when we think about what we're doing for them, I guess for a new LP or for an existing LP, think of it as, three horizons of work. There's longer term stuff that we're keeping an eye on. Again, to Brad's point, those may or may not be investable VC areas. It could be data and analytics. It could be, it could be something that's actually pretty tough for us to invest in, around some technology solution. Then there's things that'll take, like a year or so to really solidify the vision of what the business case would be, what part of the business is it going to affect, and so we'll be working to try and identify those KPIs, work through it, with the folks within the organization. And then there's we call them the quick wins, call it 6 month and in. Some of those will be portfolio companies, but these are things that we're working on that have clear, demonstrable value to a strategic LP's business. So across our strategic LPs at any given time, we'll have a series of kind of quick win things that we're working on, whether those are efforts to study, a particular area. We can get into these later, like digital tenant engagement or access control, or whatever it might be, sensors, which are some of the recent topics people have been asking about. So we'll be working through initiatives in partnership with our strategic LPs. And what that entails is actually not too dissimilar from what we're doing as a roadmap-based investor anyway, which is figuring out what are the areas that are going to drive outsized value in the space, meet with all the companies, figure out and calibrate on what's going to make one differentially more valuable for our strategic LP. And it could overlap and be an investment case, but it might not, right? It might, for whatever reason, the dynamics in the industry or competitively or pricing-wise, it just might not be a VC outcome, but it'll deliver substantial strategic impact for the LP.
Right. And Natalie, how about you? What is your primary focus within the firm on a sort of day-to-day basis?
Well, I think it's thinking through a different kind of partnership. So it's every time we bring on a portfolio company, thinking through how are they telling their story, first of all, and then who can they tell it and reach those stakeholders in a really interesting way. So that could be, helping oversee something that they're doing with their PR agency, to how to market partnership, to, hey, you should actually talk to one of our other portfolio companies because you guys have products that could work together. So it's really just trying to see that connective tissue, which is what the Fifth Wall platform is all about, is trying to be in between. And then I think it is looking ahead, because the best thing about working with these strategic LPs is it doesn't have to be an investable opportunity. So can we make an introduction to Macerich that's somebody that is a great leasing partner or could create a different opportunity line in their business, even if it's not something that we can invest in? We still want to be there to make those introductions and to see that innovation and to help sort of move that along.
Just to build on what Natalie said, because I think Natalie brings in kind of outside of the real estate perspective that's really, really valuable. And I think Brad was alluding to this earlier. I think there's what is really important in a model like ours is to kind of orchestrate this tension between being corporate, right, and kind of listening to your corporates, and at the same time being a great investor and being innovative and being forward-thinking and thinking, frankly, outside the box. Because having now worked, and I think all of us worked with a lot of corporates, obviously corporates understand their business really, really well. They understand their pain points really acutely. But frankly, what they're not so great at is identifying what they're actually going to do to solve it. And we've learned that, I think, over the last 3 years. And so it's almost like if you listen too much, you become too grounded and you get this myopia over what you should actually be pursuing as an investor. The flip side of that is what Brad was talking about earlier, which is if you just invest in whatever you want and then kind of hawk those companies to your corporates, what's the point of investing in a venture capital fund? And it's really the nexus of those two things and bring to bear like outside perspective and what's the right point that the views of corporates should be brought into new innovative companies, and where do you challenge those points of view, that I think is something we're still learning and still developing, but I think that really is what makes this model special and unique. And we're still growing in finding where are those kind of opportunities to continually improve it.
And there's one more layer that we've added to that again, I think makes our model unique, and it really kind of ties into the consortium model that Michael was referring to. We've developed programming for our strategic LPs to engage with each other. And those could be LPs that are directly competitive. They could be LPs that are the leaders in their respective industries that are non-competitive. But there are technology initiatives and priorities and ideas that have been tried, and there's lessons to be learned from those. And to be able to sit in a room with some of the best and brightest in the real estate industry and share those ideas has created, I think, a lot of alpha that we didn't expect when we first launched the fund. It's amazing how collaborative our LPs are with each other as they think through their technology strategies. And from that, we've actually found a few investments just in the ether of that, which have proven to be really interesting. So that was an unexpected surprise, but something we're working really hard to help codify.
So let's talk about deal flow, because I mean, again, we could go to another drinking game. If I had a dollar for every time someone asked me for an introduction to Fifth Wall, I think I'd be in Malibu with you, Brendan. You've done, 36 investments in the year and change that you've been around, from co-working to, with Industrious. You've done VTS early stage. You've done, I think, scooters. I mean, you've done a pretty broad selection of startups. Is there a sort of like a mandate or a criteria that you look for, whether it's stage or whether it's category? And that's one. And two is, how does somebody go about reaching fifth wall and pitch to you if they're a startup?
Can I take a stab at this? Because I think it's actually an opportunity for everyone to answer a part of it. I kind of think about fifth wall as sourcing deals in like three ways. One is actually from our corporates that Casey, I think, can talk more about as we run RFP processes. Two is just organically from our brand and how that, I think, has become a magnet for built world technology companies. And three is from venture capitalists that, frankly, we've done deals with previously and I think see us as a domain expert. So it might be useful, Casey, for you to talk a little bit about the first, Natalie the second, and Brad the third.
Yeah, we can talk just a bit about our RFP process. And so what we do is we partner with our strategic LPs. Usually, as we said, when we're onboarding them, we figure out what these pain points are, new business models that they want to explore. And so we'll think really expansively about who are all the potential partners that we could work with. And to Brendan's point about sourcing deals, oftentimes in these large global organizations, they're already working or piloting a lot of companies out there. So right there, that's a big batch of companies. We'll engage with them, we'll diligence them with the people within our client organization. And throughout that process and going through our own CRM of companies, which is expansive, we'll pull together a long list of potential, oftentimes this is 50, 60, 70 companies across the globe. And then we'll create a criteria by which we evaluate them, right? And so we talked a little bit about this already, but when we work with our strategic LPs, the two words we use are structured and specific. And it's kind of irritating, I think, at first, but the reality is, we want to be really clear about why or why not we're choosing a company, because sometimes, we expect this to happen. We'll do the same RFP for more than one LP, and you'll come to the different answer. And so when we go back to the companies that we interacted with as Fifth Wall, what we want to be able to do is tell them, like, look, we want you guys to be successful, whether or not you work with our strategic LP. And so these are the things that would be helpful for you guys to advance your company and grow. And so we'll keep an eye on, we'll track you. If you ever want somebody to talk to about your company that you've worked with in the past, whether or not it's indirect, we're happy to speak with them. And so we can provide all of that input. In so doing, we learn a ton about the spaces that are going to add value, why they're going to add value, at a granular level, right? And holistically too. So, you may say, we can provide savings of 15, 20%, and that's great in that little box. Holistically, for a strategic LP and the organizations that you all work with, there may be an offset or a moderating factor. So if you look at the business case, it may actually be the reverse, right? And you have to make some pretty strong assumptions about scaling, and so we have to rethink your deployment model or your product or whatever it might be. And so we can provide that input, and it makes us, I think, differentiated from an investing perspective, but also that's exactly what our strategic LPs are looking for. That's the strategic value add that I think we live for at Fifth Wall, and I think that's how operationally transforming the built world can happen.
And it allows us to invest thematically. So we can really sit back, we can really think about how the world's changing and why. We can advise our strategics, and then we can use the input that they give us from a prioritization perspective in terms of what's important to them, and then we can ruthlessly execute. And the great thing about what Casey's doing is he's not just providing, him and his team aren't just providing insight to the early stage companies that are participating in that process, but they're also training our strategics to engage in early stage companies to do it faster, stronger, better. I'm sure if there's any technologists in the room or entrepreneurs, they realize how bureaucratic some of these processes, sell cycles can be, and we feel like it's our job to sort of essentially train our strategics, give them that muscle memory, and hopefully create a situation where a rising tide raises all ships. And you see more than one adoption a year. You see multiple adoptions. You see real estate organizations facilitating change management. You see them building internal innovation offices. All these things, I think, will elevate the entire industry. And I think we're just a small part of that, but we're happy and really excited about the programming that we're building around it. And Casey's been a big part of that.
Yeah. You actually triggered a thought, because I'm looking at one of our portfolio company CEOs over there, and we say RFP, you might think procurement, like chairs or desks or whatever. this is strategic, right? And a lot of times, getting the right people in the room, innovation personnel, business unit leaders, business people, as opposed to functional folks that might be too calibrated on some of those specifics, to actually think outside the box. And with one of our portfolio companies here in the room, that's exactly what unlocked a very big opportunity for one of our LPs, because it moved from a procurement discussion actually to a strategic business line discussion. And it was actually the inverse of what I said before. It wasn't a 20% lift and improvement here. It was actually, you've unlocked a whole lot of new business lines from doing that. So it wasn't holistic in that sense. It was actually, they were missing the forest for the trees.
Natalie, you're around so many entrepreneurs with your investments, whether it's again BTS or Open Door Industry. What do you see as sort of a common theme with some of the entrepreneurs that you're working with that has led to sort of their ability to scale their particular startup?
Well, I think we made the joke about the built world at the beginning of this, but I think it is actually seeing both Fifth Wall and their portfolio company as not being real estate tech, as being something that's about sort of actually making an impact in the way that we work, the way that we live, like how we're thinking about travel. And I think there's all these seismic shifts that are happening in the world, and the portfolio CEOs that we think are sort of the most inspiring are the ones that actually are trying to think about what the bigger impact is. Lime, which is the scooter company you referenced earlier, is not a real estate tech company in and of itself. It is a mobility company. And the reason that we're impactful for Lime is not for the obvious reasons. It's because we have these amazing people that own and operate physical real estate that they can use to make their product more efficient, more useful, certainly better in the minds of city officials who don't want scooters cluttering their sidewalks, because we have helped them create hubs all over where people can actually use the product and it becomes an amenity for those tenants. So I think trying to think through what is the bigger impact that these folks in their individual companies can make, and then also how they can really work to service and to speak the language of the strategic LPs, which is something that Casey has been invaluable at helping facilitate, because it's not just about, okay, we got you the meeting with Heinz, we got you the meeting with Macerich. It's, we're going to be with you every step of the way along that process and helping to be that translator between, that I think has actually made it valuable, so that we can say we have contributed to $100 million of revenue for these companies because we've supplied their biggest customers, but we've stayed there along that process to actually get them to the finish line.
And just to add to that, I think Natalie has done an amazing job of kind of progressing a conversation that I think, frankly, had already started. And CREtech is, a big part of it. The fact that everyone's here is a big part of this interest in how do you innovate in real estate. But what I think we've tried to do at Fifth Wall is really kind of expand that definition to include, as Natalie said, the built world, right? Which is, what are these touch points where technology or some new commercialization of space or some really innovative idea touches on real estate in ways that might not be intuitively obvious? And I actually think in many respects that's the power of independence, of Fifth Wall being outside our corporate LPs, is to think outside the box, to identify opportunities like Lime. Because using that as an example, our real estate corporates were certainly not coming to us and saying, you need to identify a scooter partner for us. They certainly weren't. But when we explained to them that, oh, this company is going to require lots and lots of charging hubs, and they're going to need to be in buildings, and you own buildings, and distributing these devices at the consumer endpoints where they're going to offices or multifamily buildings or malls is really, really important, both for them and for you. And there's a natural connectivity between moving around a city and owning assets in a city. And then it was kind of clear, and now these partnerships have developed. And I think it's really important when you're talking about a space this big to kind of open your investment aperture wide, because there's so many opportunities for real estate corporates to be influential around innovation in this built world. And frankly, we ourselves are constantly surprised by how broad that investment aperture can be.
So let's shift the focus now to talk about specific technologies and what the market looks like and some of the things that you guys are thinking about. So Brad, you spoke at our San Francisco event in June. It was a great event. We had Josh Stein of Harbor there. We've got Ragnar, one of the great thought leaders in the blockchain here. talk, one of the things like in our audience that we attract at CREtech, we attract a lot of owners, a lot of brokers, a lot of investors, and what they're looking to us for is to provide sort of a view of where things are going. Not necessarily like what's happening right now on the ground, but what should they be thinking about? That was a great presentation with Josh. When you talk about blockchain, what are some of the main themes that you would want to communicate to the commercial real estate sector at large as to why it's going to be so impactful and when it's coming and what have you, and how it's coming?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say let's not focus too much on blockchain. I mean, it's one of many technologies that I think is going to be innovative and help, essentially transform real estate capital markets, which are some of the largest capital markets on the planet. I would think of it more as the digitization of real estate assets. And that's going to come in a lot of different form and function. We're not in the business, we are in the business of predicting the future, but I can't sit here and tell you when blockchain technology is going to become ubiquitous and disrupt the real estate industry. It is something that we are extremely interested in. It's something that Ragnar's been promoting for quite some time. He's well ahead of his time in doing that, especially for our industry. It is a technology worth investing time and energy and because your clients or your investors or your board are going to be asking you these questions. And if you don't have a response, I think you'll be left wanting. And that's, again, another purpose of our fund. It's even in scenarios where we're not recommending and/or we're not in a position to put our strategics in a technology that is transformative and it's more of a wait and see. We want to make sure that they're educated in that. So when the time is right, when the technology is ready, they're at that starting line and they're on the field and they understand the rules of the game and are well positioned to take advantage of it. So I think capital markets is definitely a space that we're wildly interested in. We've made many bets, many fintech bets to date. We've made a blockchain bet in Harbor focused on regulatory and compliance protocols for the blockchain. We've invested in Hippo, which is life insurance disruptor, States Title, which is innovating in title insurance, and a whole host of other ones. Brendan, you were going to say something.
Was that? No, I was waiting for you to finish.
Yeah.
It was so eloquent. I wanted to let you keep
Guys
going.
are so polite to each other. It's so kind.
I think for Fund 2, we're definitely going to be focused on, I'd say, the innovation occurring in materials and construction technology. Modular construction is becoming a pretty hot topic. We still feel like it's very early innings there as well, but the innovation that can occur can have massive implications as there's a lot of different factors now that I think are unavoidable, whether it be the rising cost of labor, the rising cost of construction, and a whole host of other things that are going to prevent us from falling back to how we always used to do things and really rely on technology to push things forward. Brennan, go ahead. I feel like I've talked too much.
I was just going to say, even if you're not an LP, one way to get these strategic insights, we have this newsletter that we put out every 2 weeks, and a podcast where we get super wonky on how
Except
these...
the one that I did with the F-bombs.
We get super wonky on how sort of like these businesses work and how incredibly these entrepreneurs are thinking about their business and the future of their industry. And I think it's been super helpful in terms of empowering the people that we work with, both inside our LPs, at the portfolio companies, and the broader industry, to have meaningful conversations and have a unique point of view. Here's the 5 categories we're focused on this week, whether that's energy or data and analytics, but we want to move the conversation forward across the board, not just for the people that are part of the fund.
So I just wanted to add to Brad's comment, and I think thinking about like where we are looking to invest in the future, and I think this comment will probably be a crowd pleaser to anyone that owns real estate. Well-located real estate, like at the edge, like really, really well-located, especially urban real estate, I believe is wildly, wildly undervalued. And the reasons for that are manifold. We kind of talked about one part of it, which is the importance of that strategic real estate to mobility solutions and how critical it is, because mobility is going to change. But then as you kind of expand that further and you think about 5G and the need for edge data centers and the criticality of being at the edge and close to the consumer, and then starting to think about airspace and delivery aerially, right? Or even transporting people aerially. Well-located real estate in cities hasn't even begun to actually consider that as a monetization model. Then you start to think about energy. and how powerful it is that we can now actually store energy on site and potentially sell it back into the grid from buildings, turning them into power plants. And you think about last mile delivery and how much that is going to change the supply chain. Like, well-located real estate is wildly undervalued and I believe wildly undermonetized. And I think to appreciate that and to identify those opportunities, you need to look at the edges of where real estate tech might end and transportation tech or energy tech might begin. And I think that is what is so special about, you know, being able to have that flexibility and being able to engage in that creativity and at the same time work with these really forward-looking real estate owners that can appreciate that. And I'm particularly looking at Jesse Franklin over there, who's not looking or listening to me. And they own shopping malls. And there's this narrative today that shopping, you know, malls are dying. But really, when you think about a shopping mall, it's really a town square, oftentimes deep in an urban center with acres of really valuable real estate. And when you think about those trends of energy and mobility and last mile delivery, they're going to profoundly impact what a mall looks like and what a mall might even mean in the future. And I think that's what's so exciting.
Natalie?
I was just going to say, we can talk about, Macerich just did a deal with Industrious that was announced a few weeks ago, which is they're going to use their platform and their incredibly located and beautiful real estate to actually function as co-working spaces. So this idea that we can cross-pollinate these people, if we're thinking creatively about how that space can be used, it's really exciting.
And just to add the lens from some of our strategic LPs, I think there's a lot to be done from a consumerization of real estate perspective, because I think, you know, with smartphones and the expectations that we now have in terms of availability of information and access and so forth, there's a lot more, I think this is probably obvious to everybody, that we can do from those amazing locations inside the building as well to deliver the type of experience that we expect in other aspects of our life. And so I think there's a ton of things to happen around consumerization. And I also think from a space utilization, if you think of a 10-story building, what those 10 stories are going to look like in the future is also quite different and has a lot of capital markets implications. And because of the changing nature of talent markets and HR, a lot of the occupiers in these buildings, their expectations, their needs have changed. And you could make the case that they've transformed in the sense that they're never going back, right? And so there's a lot of things that you know, from a technology or an innovation perspective, you can do to be reactive and actually go on offense as it relates to that. But there's other things just to be at market that are going to, you know, they're here for a lot of people in a lot of markets.
So Brad, what's next? I mean, we've got to wrap up in a few minutes, but what's next for Fifth Wall? I mean, Brendan, you and I were in at ICSC, you were talking about investing in digitally native brands. I know that there's been some talk about some global expansion as well. What's coming next from Fifth Wall that you can talk about?
So I think what's next for Fifth Wall is to continue to execute on the strategy that we laid out here, but do so on a much grander scale. I think we are in the process of raising a second fund. In doing so, we're going to be expanding the scope and scale of our strategic partners exponentially. We're going to increase the consortium, both here domestically and even more importantly now globally. The innovation that's occurring in real estate technology is not just happening here in the US, and our strategic partners don't just own real estate here in the US. They have global portfolios with global needs, and the innovation occurring not only in the US, but in APAC and EMEA and other places around the globe. We need to have our fingers on the pulse of that innovation if we're going to be true strategic partners. So we will be bringing in big real estate owner operators and other countries across the globe to gain their perspectives and insights and use that to make better bets. And hopefully, again, continue to evolve the conversation around real estate technology, which I think is so important for our industry. And we hopefully can be stewards of that. And I think Michael's and his team here have done the same. So I think we've got big things in store. We're not satisfied, I guess is to say, with the progress we've made so far. We're proud of it. We think we've done a great job of elevating the conversation and hopefully bringing a lot more credibility and a lot more expertise to bear. But we look forward to partnering with everyone here in the room to continuing to move the industry forward and look forward to being partners with all of you and helping make that happen.
And just,
Casey, what are you most excited about in terms of the future for the firm?
Yeah, no, I would echo what Brad said in terms of doubling down. I think there's pockets of innovation all over the world within our strategic LPs, and I think if I had to say one thing, it would be interacting with the leaders within our strategic LPs that are in the business. Right? They're not necessarily the innovation leaders. They're running a business unit, they're running a region, and they have ideas. And I think, again, to Brad's point, because of organizations like yours and all the innovation that's been happening over the years, people have ideas. They want to do things. They want to try things. And I'm excited to help, guide that energy and guide those, that transformation in the real estate industry at the front lines.
Natalie?
Helping people be part of that leading edge, as Brendan was saying, and I think really helping to move the industry forward, again, with CREtech and others in the space.
Final words?
Yeah, everyone's ready to start drinking, so I'll try to make it punchy. We want to do more, a lot more. And when you say that, it's like more is not always better, but in this case, I think it is better. And the reason for that it's probably a few. One is this is an evolving market. This is a market that 3 years ago looked very different than it does today. The companies have matured. There's more companies. They need more capital. They have more opportunity. There's more partners for them. More capital into this space is definitely a good thing. Two, I think it's really good for the companies we invest in to have more distribution, more partners, more people that can guide them, more people that can help them grow. And the third is, I think it's really good for our strategic partners. As we've looked, as we started working with international real estate owner-operators, what we found is that a lot of the work we did on our first fund, we're starting to see these intellectual economies of scale, where owning an office building in Singapore or Tokyo or London or Chicago, there are some regional idiosyncrasies, but by and large, the majority of the pain points are the same, and they are thinking through the same problems and have the same opportunities. And so what we're seeing is there's this opportunity to leverage what we have in this consortium to better serve strategics by frankly just having more of them and going bigger.
Wonderful. I think we have time for a few questions. Anybody have any questions for our friends at Fifth Wall? We got one here.
Ask about one particular sector, which is co-living. Can some of you comment on this particular sector? Thank you.
Sure. So Fifth Wall doesn't have an investment in co-living. We've looked at the space pretty aggressively. We love the dynamics of co-living as it relates to providing additional ways for consumers to access living spaces. I think Imitation Homes is a good example of institutionalizing single-family homes for rent. I think co-living is offering a very unique avenue for customers to find maybe not in all instances cheaper, but potentially a differentiated living experience, especially early on. I'd say where we ended up in that evaluation was we were much more intrigued by the advent of what I'd refer to as the distributed hospitality space, in that the economies that Airbnb has essentially encouraged and ultimately proven out in the short-term rental economy, Airbnb has a massive problem. They have unlimited demand, but limited supply. And I don't mean limited supply in that, of course, they've got a ton of supply, but it's not all great. So what you've seen in recent years, and what we thought was more interesting for our strategic partners to work with, was these new hospitality brands that were leveraging the arbitrage of short-term rentals and the desire for consumers to access it to essentially build hotels within Class A multifamily assets across the country to provide those multifamily owners an amenity for their tenants and a differentiated revenue stream above market for their bottom line, and providing sort of the Airbnb ecosystem of short-term rentals the highest quality stay experience that exists today. We invest in a company called Lyric. There's other companies like Sonder. You're going to see the Marriotts, the Starwoods of the short-term rental space crop up in the coming years. Airbnb is wildly supportive of it, and we feel like there's going to be a significant expansion of that business model in the short term. While I still think co-living is relevant and will be a force to be reckoned with, we saw that we could make a bigger impact in that space first, which is why we focused our capital there.
Can I just add one thing? We hear co-living a lot, and I think one thing that the venture capital market and to some extent the real estate market gets wrong about co-living is they think it's co-working for housing. It's not. It's totally different. It is in some ways bigger. Multifamily is like 6% of the US economy, bigger than the office industry, but it's much more complicated, right? Not everyone needs an office, everyone needs a home. There are just complications to housing, and there's a supply, an existing supply, and the line between co-living and a small apartment is pretty darn blurry. So there's a lot of complexities to it that I think are nuances that are often missed both by investors and real estate owners.
Other questions? We got a few.
I would just have one thing on the regional variation too. Having spent some time in Asia and working with LPs over in Asia that have different business dynamics and different market dynamics, those nuances are different. And while the lines are still blurry, the expectations that individuals have from housing are also very different. And the pressures in certain urban markets are different. And so you see models that may not work in one market or another, or one continent or another, actually do work. And those preconditions for success exist based on the delivery of those products and the expectations of consumers.
I think we got one from Connell. Connell, no softballs. We know that they're an investor of yours, so no softballs.
Just out of curiosity, what are some examples of exciting real estate technology trends that you're seeing internationally that haven't quite caught on to the same extent here in the US?
Good one.
Facial recognition.
Yeah, that's
Sorry. You don't really need access cards to enter a building, or you shouldn't. I think everyone can agree on that, given that we're all carrying supercomputers in our pockets. But actually, why do you even need the supercomputer? You have a face. And so I think that's one of the opportunities, for example, that was solved, frankly, by pioneering real estate owners in Asia that has not made its way here to the US.
And I'd say there's innovation occurring that I think is more regionally idiosyncratic that is super interesting. We invested in a company called Logi in Sao Paulo. We were wildly interested and intrigued by the logistics innovations that were occurring here in the U.S., mainly proliferated by Amazon. But what we lacked to find in countries like Brazil was e-commerce penetration at scale. E-commerce penetration in Brazil is less than 5%. The only reason being is that they lack the infrastructure to facilitate next day delivery. But they have this amazing biker boy network because everything in Brazil has to be notarized. And with logistics technology and cell phone technology, Logi's been able to build this massive delivery network facilitating last mile, both food, notarization, and package delivery at scale. And they've been wildly successful in Brazil. So that technology probably wouldn't be as relevant here in the US because we have so much infrastructure already. So there are those idiosyncrasies that we're looking for, and the success cases in other countries that we apply to, that we say, hey, something that worked here, this version of it could work really well here because the same dynamics apply. People in Brazil are not going to not shop online. It's just a question of, when they got that package the next day, would they do it more? The answer, of course, is yes.
Got time for one more? Another question?
Hey there. I find your relationship with your strategic partners and LPs very interesting. And I'm curious to learn more about what that brainstorming process is like of actually identifying their core issues, like before just immediately trying to solve their problems, but more so understanding their problems and finding out what the best solutions are and what needs to be solved.
You gotta go work at McKinsey for 7 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a great question, and for some of our new strategic LPs, we're in the midst of that right now. So, we're borrowing heavily from innovation and transformation frameworks that are well worn, and we're actually bringing it straight into the real estate technology innovation world with our strategic LPs. So, how that actually happens is we go to our strategic LPs and we walk the halls and we set up meetings with people that lead the different business units and we interview them. And we obviously bring a huge menu of ideas. Some of them are shorter term in nature, others are, as we said earlier, some are longer term, more transformational things. And then others are just business model shifts. And so we always tell our strategic LPs, you can count on us to bring these wild ideas for things that could affect your business. And if we're not challenging you on these areas, we're not doing our job. And so we go through this exercise across all the relevant business units, and we try to find the people that have ideas, at the point of impact. And we call it the money step. We look for the thing that's actually going to change the business in a material way in those markets. So we go out and then we come back in. So after we've gone out, we've gathered all these ideas. That's actually the easy part. The hard part is prioritizing that. So synthesizing all the information from each of the business units or functions and what's going to have the biggest impact for their business. Where are they most ready to act on it? And then from there we distill it across the business units on up and we present it to the executive committee. We call these the strategic roadmaps, the future vision. Each organization has a different language. We present that. We think it has about a 12-month lifespan. And we sit down and we say, this is what we're working on. And we think it's going to, we're ready to get started. We're going to start working with, this group over here, that group over there, and this group over here. And we'll be back in 3 months. This is what we hope to have then. So I think that's probably maybe more detailed than you were looking for, but I think that's
it's really complicated.
Yeah.
I think Casey might have just given away all our IP for free.
Yeah.
Hey, on that note, I want to thank you. Oh, you got one more.
Can I actually say one thing?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, the other thing is getting them together in person, which I think we talked about a little, which now we can go to a network here, but I think we do an LP conference once a year that is not your traditional LP conference. We certainly go through our investments, but we also have a 3-hour brainstorming session where we get out there with whiteboards and we talk about the ideas that cross all of them. And then now we've started doing monthly sort of sessions where we focus and drill down on specific topics. So we really try to facilitate opportunities for the LPs to broaden their thinking but engage directly.
I'm just exhausted thinking about how much work there is.
Can I just pay a shameless but authentic thank you to you.
Oh, you're welcome.
CREtech and Michael and the whole organization, you guys were here before Fifth Wall. You've contributed to a dialogue in this space, which I think was and is much needed. And frankly, Fifth Wall has been a major beneficiary of that. So on behalf of all of us, everything that we've been able to do is in large part a part of this community that everyone here represents. So thank you, Michael.
Thank you, my friend Pierce. So that's CREtech Los Angeles.